The end of death. Look at your hands. Look at the face in the mirror. There is a clock ticking inside of you. A biological timer embedded in your very DNA. It is the engine of life and the harbinger of its end. We are all born with an expiration date. This mortality has shaped everything about us. Our art, our religions, our concept of legacy, our desperate, beautiful struggle to create meaning in a finite time. But what if we could stop the clock? Imagine a breakthrough. Not a magic potion, not a mythical fountain, but a science. A gene therapy that targets senescence. A treatment that perfects cellular regeneration. It doesn't make us invulnerable. Accidents, violence, disease can still kill us. But it stops aging, dead in its tracks. You reach the age of 25, take the treatment, and your body simply stops declining. Forever. Biological immortality is achieved. The first reaction would be pure ecstasy, a global celebration. The end of Alzheimer's, of heart disease, of the slow, painful decay of the body. Families would no longer have to watch their loved ones grow old and fade away. We would have an infinite amount of time. Time to learn every language. Time to master every instrument. Time to read every book. Time to love, to explore, to live. We would have conquered humanity's oldest and greatest enemy, death itself. It would be a utopia, at least for a little while. The curse of forever. The first problem is the obvious one: overpopulation. With no one dying of old age, the Earth's population would skyrocket. This is a logistical nightmare, but it's a solvable one. Strict birth control laws would be enacted. A one-child, or even a no-child policy for centuries. We might finally be forced to reach for the stars, colonizing Mars and beyond. This is the problem everyone thinks of, but it is the least interesting and least terrifying consequence of eternal life. The true price is not paid in resources. It is paid in the currency of the soul. Let's talk about the psychological weight of forever. First, the death of ambition. Why rush to write a great novel if you have 1,000,000 years to do it? Why strive to make your mark on the world when you can just do it next century? The deadline of death is what gives our actions urgency. Without it, humanity might sink into a planetary scale procrastination. A great, comfortable, meaningless stagnation. Second, the burden of memory. The human mind is not designed to hold 1,000 years of memories. Imagine carrying the grief of every loved one you've ever lost to an accident. The memory of every mistake, every regret, every heartbreak, playing out with perfect clarity for eternity. Would we become a species of ghosts, haunted by the infinite corridors of our own past? Third, the terror of boredom. After you've lived for 2,000 years, after you've learned every skill, visited every city, watched every movie, what is left? What happens when the greatest minds have solved every problem? What happens when artists have explored every conceivable form of art? Humanity might face a new kind of existential crisis, the Great Ennui. And finally, the fear of stuckness. Immortality is not invulnerability. What happens if you are sentenced to life in prison? Now it means eternal prison. What happens if you suffer a catastrophic, irreversible injury? What about a mental illness that cannot be cured? You would be trapped in a state of suffering with no escape. Forever. A world divided. And there is a darker, more immediate problem. The cure for death would be the most complex, most sought-after technology in history. It would not be cheap. It would not be available to everyone at once. And this would create the final, most brutal division in human history. Not a division of wealth, or of class, or of nationality. A division of biology. The Immortals and the Mortals. Imagine a world where one group of people gets to live forever, while the rest are still doomed to die. How long would that society last before it tears itself apart? The mortals would look upon the immortals with a mixture of awe, jealousy, and burning rage. Their one short life now seeming utterly insignificant. Revolutions would ignite, fueled by the most fundamental injustice imaginable. The immortals, in turn, would become defined by a single, all-consuming emotion. Fear. Fear of the mortals. Fear of accidents. Fear of any risk that could end their precious eternity. They would retreat into fortified, sterile enclaves. Their infinite lives would become incredibly small, defined only by the avoidance of risk. The world would be fractured into two species. One that lives and one that simply exists. The redefinition of life. Even if the cure was available to all, it would shatter our most fundamental concepts. What does love and marriage mean? The vow to "till death do us part" becomes a terrifying, eternal sentence. Would anyone commit to a single partner for 10,000 years? Or would we live in a series of century-long relationships, a carousel of love and loss? What does family mean? How would family structures work when the concept of a generation becomes meaningless? You could have a great-great-great-grandmother who looks the same age as you. The wisdom and authority of elders would vanish. Children, a rarity under strict birth control, would be raised by a society of eternally young adults. And what does progress mean? The physicist Max Planck once said, "Science advances one funeral at a time." New ideas often triumph only when the old generation that opposed them dies off. What happens when the founders of a company never retire? When the creators of a scientific paradigm never leave their posts? Would society become intellectually stagnant, ruled by the permanent, unchanging ideas of its first immortal generation? Would innovation die because no one ever gets out of the way? The gift of the ending. This brings us to a sobering conclusion. Perhaps we have been looking at death all wrong. Perhaps it is not a curse to be cured. Perhaps it is the very thing that gives our lives meaning. It's the deadline of death that gives urgency to our actions. It's the finiteness of time that gives value to each moment. It's the knowledge that it will all end that makes the fleeting experiences of love, joy, and creation so incredibly sweet. Immortality doesn't give us more life. It just gives us more time. An ocean of time so vast that any single moment becomes worthless. And it forces us to ask the ultimate question. Without an ending, does the story have any meaning at all?
The questions are endless. The journey has just begun. If you believe in the power of asking what if, join our community of thinkers. Subscribe and hit the bell to continue exploring possible worlds. Your next thought experiment is waiting.